Yeah, so this afternoon we have a couple of hours together, and I would like to use the time in the way that's most benefit for all of you. So I think that maybe we can make the main emphasis on discussion and answering any particular questions, topics that you would like to bring up. But to begin with, I maybe just say a few words generally. Okay, in a humanistic medical program, why invite a religious teacher to come and address you? And I'd like to begin with just inviting you to consider the meaning of the word religion. What does that word really mean? Now, the prestige and the authority of Western culture, Western academic establishment is such that the definitions of things like, including religion, are usually coined in the West. And this has led to what I would suggest is a false understanding or superficial understanding that there is such a thing called religion. And that, for instance, you can say, well, religions are like this, and religion is like that, and I'm not a very religious person, and consider that those are meaningful statements. So if you look up the word religion in an English dictionary or even an encyclopedia, then the definition of a religion is really the religion with which people in the West are familiar, with the assumption that this is a universal definition. So for most of you, I think, are Thai, and I always think it's interesting how the word universal or sākon is often used to mean Western. So like the way of dressing, if you dress in a Western suit, it's like suit sākon. So this is part of the what you call cultural imperialism. It's this creating the idea that the default mode of everything that has real meaning is the Western mode, and everyone else is sort of catching up and trying to be like that. And so your country or your culture is judged to the extent to which you correspond and that you follow that default mode. And this is also in the realm of religion. So from my point of view, there are different families of religions, and so certain statements you can make about one family of religions are not necessarily valid for a different family of religions or different species even, we might say. So the religions that people in the West are familiar with are what we call the monotheistic religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism. And this family of religions all grew up in the Middle East. They share some of the same books, and they share essentially the same idea of what a religion is. And to sum that up most simply or succinctly, religions are belief systems. And you may have observed often the word religion and the word faith are used interchangeably. They're considered the same thing. You can say the Christian religion or the Christian faith or the Islamic religion or Islamic faith. So faith is absolutely central. And the more faith you have, the better. There's no such thing as too much faith. Now, that is, I say, a model for one particular type of religion. But the religions that grew up in India, specifically Buddhism, are not belief system. Buddhism, I would characterize essentially as an education system. So this is a very important distinction, isn't it, between a belief system and an education system. And if you look at Buddhism as a belief system, and you see, as many educated Thai people do today, look at Buddhism through Western eyes, then you misunderstand the Buddhist teaching and you don't get the benefits from it that you could and should. So to give you an example or some, to expand upon that a little bit, in the Buddhist teaching, there is a very interesting word called Satchanuraka or Satchanurak. And that word can be translated into English as caring for the truth. So how do you care for the truth? The answer is you don't claim that you know something and when you merely believe in it, because it is possible to believe absolutely fervently, 100% in something which is not true. So let's just consider that statement for a moment. Even those people who are members of the faith-based religion would have to acknowledge that everyone outside of their religion, even if they have 100% like iron, rock solid faith in their religion, believe in something which is not true, because the only people who have the truth are the people in their religion. So whether or not you are a member of one of those religions or you're an atheist, I think you must accept this proposition that it's possible to believe something which is not true. Now, in Western world, you often get this circular thinking. So you say, this is true. And if you are questioned, how do you know that's true? Then often the religious person will say, the moment I heard this, the moment I read this, I just knew. I just knew it was true. And so the circular reasoning is, it's true because I believe it, and I believe it because it's true. And so this is a cause of so much conflict in the world today. So the Buddha has this critique of religious beliefs. He's saying knowing something and believing something are not the same. You can believe in something that's not true. Therefore, you should always be humble about your beliefs and not insist that you must be right because you believe it. So in the Buddhist teaching, faith is taught within the context of an overall development of the human being, or this education system. That being the case, we look at faith as a mental factor, the psychology of faith. And we can observe that often when people have strong faith, they say, oh, because God or whatever it is that someone believes in, they say, it's given me, this deity has blessed me in so many ways. So a Buddhist hypothesis would say, how much of that is actually from the deity and how much of it is just the psychological benefit of having a strong belief in something? Because there are definite psychological beliefs in strong faith. But the Buddha also said that faith must always be governed by or accompanied by critical thinking. And in particular, for what reason? Because without it, faith can easily become fanaticism or superstition. So faith has a value, it has a role to play in this Buddhist education system because faith clarifies. You know, when you have so many different choices, so many different things, and you can't go into the pros and cons of every single thing you meet in your life, you know, sooner or later you just decide on one thing. So it's faith clarifies and faith energizes. So that what you want from faith in your development as a Buddhist is you want the clarity, focus, and energy that faith gives you, but at the same time, you need the critical investigation and governance to prevent this faith from becoming superstition or fanaticism. So this is an example of the difference. So we have faith in both religions, but faith in a faith-centered religion, in that family of religions, is a very different thing from faith in Buddhism. So the Buddha's was like a revolution in religious world, in that the Buddha, I think, is the first religious teacher to say that we are not the playthings or the creation of a god or gods. Religious life is not a matter of protecting yourself against unseen forces or asking for blessings from unseen forces. But the religion is about human experience. So we can say it is the humanist religion, if you like, because the focus is all on the human being, and either as an individual or as a society, and saying that the causes and conditions of human suffering and the causes and conditions of human flourishing are not to be found in creating a special kind of relationship with deities and gods, but are based upon wisdom and understanding of the nature of our life, the nature of our body and mind. So the root cause of human suffering in Buddhist analysis is avijja, or ignorance. Ignorance of the way things are, ignorance of this body, this mind, how it really functions, what's really going on. We have make a lot of false assumptions. There's a lot of mistaken ideas we have about ourselves, which cause us unnecessary suffering. But the Buddhist belief, and this is the faith of the Buddhist, human beings, men and women equally, have the potential to find true happiness, to find true fulfillment through a holistic system of development, education, of training of our behavior, our actions, our speech, of our emotions, of our thinking, the way that we look at the world and ourselves. This is what we call the Eightfold Path. So this is the human-based religion. All the answers, all the problems are right here, and all the answers are right here. But we won't reach those answers without a systematic training, development. And this is the the gift that the Buddha gave us. It's a system of education. So in Buddhism, the test, if someone say they have faith in Buddhism, then how would you know whether that's a true statement or not? Well, you look at the way somebody lives their life, the way they act, the way they speak, the way they think about the world. This is how you express yourself as a Buddhist. It's not a matter of maintaining strong faith in dogmas. There are no dogmas in Buddhism. There's nothing. There's not an idea of someone who's going to reward you if you're good or punish you if you're bad. This is a training, and we create ourselves, we create our lives moment by moment. We create our future through the quality of our actions of body, speech, and mind. So Buddhism is encouraging us to learn how to take responsibility for our body, speech, and mind, and to create the kind of future that we aspire to. So that's just like a preliminary introduction. Now, maybe is there anybody would like to comment on that or to ask? Have you prepared some questions or? So just to say, so this isn't like a Dhamma Tesana, or so. What that means is, if you don't agree with me, it's perfectly all right. My bab, okay, you know. I like it if someone disagrees with me. You know, if you've got some good argument, I like to hear it.
Sure. I have a question. So how do you know like whether Buddhism is a religion? Like it could just be just a philosophy, like, you know.
Well, what does that mean?
Like a lot of, if you look at a lot of Buddhists, like they also believe in like other deities or other gods, or, you know, like they don't really believe in Buddhism.
What does that mean?
Okay, in Thailand, let's say like a lot of people also pray to other like deities, like Hindu gods and other gods. So I think that might be their religion, whereas Buddhism is like a philosophy that teaches them how to live their life.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure, you know, like philosophy, again, it's kind of a Western idea. But even if you were to ask a Muslim, and, you know, a Muslim would say, yeah, we have a philosophy of life also. So I don't, you know, this distinction between religion and philosophy and way of life, I'm not sure that I would agree that's a very useful way of talking about it. But of course, I think that one observation you can make, if you have a faith-based religion based on, you can summarize in, say, 5 core beliefs or 5 core things you have to do every day, that's a very portable religion. That's one that you can spread and you can maintain and grow very easily. Whereas Buddhism, being an education system, essentially, in my view, then whether or not it flourishes, develops, or declines is very much dependent on the quality of instruction that's given. And this is the real weakness in Thailand, whether it's on the part of the Sangha, or we can't really blame schools because Buddhism has been taken out of the school curriculum. But because Buddhism is not an evangelical religion, it doesn't try to convert anybody. It's not aggressive religion. It tends to try to live in harmony with people of other beliefs. When you don't have a clear instruction, what are the Buddhist principles, then people get confused and they can easily absorb non-Buddhist beliefs without realizing it. So this is what you find in Thailand. People say, I'm Buddhist, but when you ask them, then actually a lot of their thinking and a lot of it is in conflict with Buddhist principles, and they're not really aware of it because no one's really explained this to them. But and don't forget that in Thailand, Thai people were animists for thousands of years before they became Buddhists, and then there was a strong Brahmin influence before. And so when Buddhism came in, it's not like it's going to forcibly, it's going to kill all the animists, or burn their houses to the ground, or put them in prison, or they just like live together. So you have this, you get this animist and Brahminist influence. So it's the role and it's the duty of the monks to point out to what extent, just maintaining friendly relations with other religions, but don't get them confused with Buddhist teaching. But inevitably, if you have a population of 60, 70 million people, you're going to have, quite a wide variety of approaches. So I think it's really important to keep coming back. Well, what is the essential features of Buddhism? Is there something really worth giving some attention to, or what has Buddhism got to say to me in my life and in my career? And I'm suggesting it's got a lot to offer. So it's not like, as I say, like proclaiming now I'm a Buddhist and making it into our identity necessarily, but being able to appreciate the Buddhist worldview and the Buddhist value system, and in particularly the very practical advice the Buddha gives us for living our life, whether it's as a monastery or in the world. So I don't think that's really such a, that question is, there is the Buddha Dhamma and the teachings, and in some places, many places, they are misunderstood or only practiced in part. But there are also, a lot of very inspiring and, for what I would say, inspiring and uplifting Buddhist individuals and communities. One thing I would observe is that, excuse me if it's not true for you, but a lot of times in Bangkok, people say Thailand is like this and Thai people are like that. And what they mean is like middle-class people in Bangkok. There's very little contact with upcountry and communities upcountry and what's going on outside of Bangkok bubble. So, and one of the, when you are, as a young doctor, you'll probably get a chance to go up country, and some of you have probably done that already, and have a bit more of a wider view of the country and what's going on. When I was, this is not really so exact a comparison, but in 1976, I was living in Tehran, in Iran, which was rapidly westernizing, and in Tehran, you're just feeling it's becoming more and more like the Western world, and it's just this idea. This is the inevitable thing that happens. As countries become richer, they become more and more like Europe or America, and then like a year or so, a couple of years after, they had the Islamic Revolution, and it completely flipped over because people in Tehran just didn't have any idea just how much, how this huge gulf in their way of life and their thinking there was between them and 90% of the people who lived outside of Tehran. So it's not like quite so bad as that in Thailand, I'm saying, but just as a point to, when making generalizations about Thailand and Thai. I mean, the longer I've lived in Thai, I've been here 44 years now, and the longer I live here, the less I feel confident about making generalizations about the country and the culture and the religion at all. I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Hello, yeah. So can you be like a Buddhist and also a Christian at the same time?
I would say no.
No?
No.
Because if you're a Buddhist, like, according to Buddhist teaching, like, you need to have the right view, right mindset and everything. If you follow everything and also you believe in, like, like a God, like a supreme being, is it wrong?
Well, I mean, if you're a Christian, you believe that there's a creator God, you believe that Jesus is his son who sacrificed, and as a Buddhist, those kind of ideas are not sustainable. I think. I think that a real problem for, I don't want to get into too much talking about other religions, but the abiding problem for monotheistic religions like Christianity is, how do you put the world as you experience it today together with the idea of an all-powerful, all-loving God? And this has been, the big issue with this kind of, if God is all-powerful and all-loving, why is there millions and millions of people who don't have enough to eat, who don't know? And for me, God is a hypothesis. And I would say if you take that hypothesis and examine the world as we experience, the hypothesis doesn't stand up to any kind of analysis. That would be my simple response. I think that so these kind of the defense of the idea of God, and it's going to get like in philosophy and theology, this has been going on for a couple of thousand years. But I have an interesting, I think, an interesting challenge that, and it's interesting because most things, if you Google, you can find sort of good answers, and this is one thing, and even Google is almost completely silent about. So how, if you believe in an all-powerful, all-loving God, do you explain miscarriage? So the latest figures are like between 1 in 3, like between a half and a third of every pregnancy end in miscarriage. So how do you explain that in terms of belief in God? So you have to be baptized before you can go to heaven. Why? What possible reason could you have for allowing a human being to, or a consciousness, because Christianity belief in sort of conception, to come to nothing after a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks? How can you explain that? I don't think that there's any way to explain it. And as I say, finding theologians or Christian philosophers to justify this, I've not been able to find it. So that's just one, maybe extreme argument against the existence of gods. But I don't really want to go into that very much. But just to answer your question, that I don't think that belief in a creator God is sustainable or stands up to any kind of analysis, particularly if you're starting to look at the body and mind, because essentially what Buddhist analysis is concerned with is causality. Why things happen, why things arise, in any kind of phenomena, what are the causes and the conditions for this phenomena? And if this kind of conduct, this kind of behavior, what are the results of it? So Buddhist, in the wisdom area of Buddhist practice, we're very much focused on causality and understanding. So this is why often the Four Noble Truths, which are the core teachings, are explained with a medical metaphor. So you have the illness, which is dukkha, then you have the cause, and then you have the cure, and then you have the treatment leading to the cure. So it's very it's quite a lot of similarity in those two approaches.
Ajahn, as we are all the medical students, and nowadays we normally receive much.
Would it be possible when you ask questions just to take your mask off?
Okay.
Get difficult to hear. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. As we are all the medical students, and nowadays we receive much of all information from the professor, from the faculty. So according to the Kālāma Sutta, how should we process all these information to make it?
Yes, thank you. Well, are you all familiar with this, the reference here, the Kālāma Sutta? So the Kālāma Sutta is something called it's one of the teachings of the Buddha which is most well known in the West, because it's kind of like something you would never meet in any of the texts in the faith-based religions, because the Buddha is saying, don't believe something just because the Buddha said it. Don't believe it just because some authority said it. Don't believe it just because it makes sense. So it's like it really gives you kind of encouragement to make your own decisions. But I think that this teaching has also been misrepresented and taken too far. Because what the Buddha is saying is, you can't be absolutely sure. It's not like because the Buddha says it, therefore it's true, you don't have to think about it, or because a religious teacher said it, or because it's in a book that everybody accepts, and so on. But that is not to be taken as a rejection of all authority. For instance, if you say like a high school physics teacher says this and Albert Einstein says that, it makes sense to believe Albert Einstein rather than a high school teacher. Okay, so you give more weight to someone who's been a doctor for 30 years or someone who's just starting off their training as a doctor, because they have more knowledge, more experience, they're just more trustworthy. So the Kālāma Sutta is saying you don't reject all authority and you have to somehow find this answer in yourself. That's the kind of Western romantic idea, just follow your dream and that kind of idea. But you'd be foolish not to draw upon the knowledge and the experience of people who've been doing the same thing that you're interested in for many, many years, or from people from past generations. But what the Buddha is saying is, don't believe because it's the Buddha or because it's authority, therefore it must be true. So you always just keep a little bit. So you say, okay, Albert Einstein, physics, 99% trust, or Ajahn Jayasaro, he's been a monk for 44 years, he knows, maybe 70, 80%, I don't know, but whatever it might be. But the idea, all the Buddha is saying is, don't give 100% assent to something that you haven't experienced directly for yourself. But my argument is that many people take this Kālāma Sutta too far, and then reject authority, which is really a wonderful resource. So seeing, there's so much, we have access through internet now, incredible resources that we've not had before. And you have, in an institution like this, you have access to wonderful teachers who, have so much to share with you. So, why reinvent the wheel? Why start from zero, when there's so many people to learn from?
So, first of all, I want to say, I really appreciated the insights in comparing Buddhism to monotheistic religions. I was particularly interested in the point that you said about how Buddhism doesn't have a reward or punishment system, because at least possibly in my limited understanding, I feel that a lot of karma, or what we say in Thai, bun, that kind of feels to me like a reward system in itself. And it motivates a lot of the religious actions of Thai people, whether it's we want to tak baat, just to tambun, or if, for example, when we discuss meditation asได้รับอานิสงส์บุญมากกว่า, you receive more buñ from that, as opposed to การทำทาน, so giving out things. So I was wondering exactly how that comes into play in this.
Yeah, so first of all, what key teaching of the Buddha, which sounds very modern, is the Buddha is encouraging us to create some balance between perceiving things as content and as process. Most things content is what draws you in, and we focus and we're obsessed with content. But Buddha is teaching us to look in terms of process. Okay, so one thing I say is like our life, we are verbs. It's only compare with language. This body is a verb. Your mind is a verb. It's not a thing. Or consciousness is a verb. It's not a thing. You don't have a thing called a citta, or you don't have a thing called a body. All you have is processes. So some processes are very quick, like the mind. You can see it changing all the time. Whereas the body, much slowly. You can certain changes you can see in terms of you don't drink anything for a while. You start to get thirsty. You get hungry, or you get tired, and certain physiological changes you can map, in real time. Others, in terms of aging process, for instance, it's longer. You can't see it on a daily basis. So we're talking about, but this flowing nature of phenomena is not random. And we as human beings, we can understand, we can recognize the nature of this flow, and we can, to a certain degree, affect that flow. So the Buddha's insight into karma is really insight into causality and moral causality. So the Buddha is saying that, well, let's start off with a physical example first. If you put your hand into a fire, it's going to burn your skin. Okay, there's nobody punishing you for being so stupid as to put your hand into the fire. It's not somebody saying, right, now I'm going to pay you and teach you not to be so stupid in future. It's just, this is the nature, this is what happens when human skin comes into contact with fire. So it's a natural process. And the Buddha says this flow of natural processes also is true on the moral sphere, in the spiritual sphere. Now, okay, so spiritual and psychological often, it's not so clear to distinguish between them. But let me give you an example of bad karma, for instance. Let's say you're working together in a group and you're kind of stressed out, and there's one person who's not pulling their weight in the group, and their behavior is kind of obnoxious sometimes, and you really think you sometimes you just want to shout at them, and you just grit your teeth. And let's say that one day, for one reason or another, you had a really bad day, really stressed out, he acts particularly badly, and you lose it, and you just shout at that person. Okay, so that leap from not saying anything to saying anything the first time, maybe that's quite a big distance. It's taken you like a few months before you get to that point. But notice how now you've done it once, you've created the likelihood that you'll do it a second time. And it's much more likely that you'll do it a second time after you've done it a first time. And if you've done it a second time, it's even more likely that you'll do it a third time. And so this is how we create ourself and our life and our relationships through these decisions that we make and through these actions. So from being someone who doesn't express anger, you can become someone who expresses it very easily simply by allowing this habit to develop. So this is the law of karma. This is how we can. This is the one area of the law of karma that we can see very clearly. How if you determine to act or to think in a certain way and you do it consistently, it changes. And until 20, 30 years ago, the idea of neuroplasticity was not accepted by medical establishment, and now it's been, I think, proved and agreed that the brain changes through behavior, and so that's we say that's karma also, even on physical level, and the so neuroplasticity. So I don't know if you study that. Is that part of the course? Yeah. Sorry.
Not reached that point yet,
Yeah. Well, just like one of the really cool kind of experiments they did was, for instance, they had somebody playing a musical instrument for a few minutes every day for a long period of time, and then the area of the brain associated with that coordination of the brain and the fingers grew. It changed. It was plastic. It's like it's not fixed. So that's okay. That's not so amazing. But what's amazing is that in the control group, they had another group of students who just imagined they were playing music for 5 minutes, and their brain changed. And similarly, this may be comfort to some of you. Just imagining that you're exercising actually has an effect on your physiology, on your brain function. So this is karma, the whatever volitional action, either expressed physically, verbally, or in the mind, has a result. It has consequences, and the consequences are in harmony with the causes. So in Thai we say "tam di dai di, tam chua dai chua," but it's a more accurate phrasing of that was "tam di dai kwam di, tam chua dai kwam chua," because every time you do something good, you just increase the power of goodness in your mind. Every time you do something unkind, selfish, then you increase the energy, the power of that selfishness, that unkindness in your mind. This is the law of karma as we appreciate it. So it's what I was saying, there's not someone up there in the sky, rewarding you or punishing you. This is just natural processes of causality as expressed in the human being. Yeah. In terms of making, so this is a little bit more kind of Buddhist, isn't it now? But let's talk about making merit. So the Buddhist teaching is that if you give something, then if you have a gaining idea, you want something in return, you don't make very much merit. The less desire you have for some kind of reward, whether it would be a material reward or even some praise or good reputation, then the less merit there is. So the more you're free, then the more merit there is. And again, this is something that you can investigate. Like if you try to remember some occasion in the past where you did a good thing, but really, it was in order to get something in return. And now you think about it, and you just kind of feel chui, it's like, it's like a transaction. You took part in a transaction. But if you have, and I'm sure you have, times in the past where you acted really well and kindly, and you did it with no desire for anybody to even know about it. It was just like good thing to do, right thing to do. But now, if you recall that, even like after a year or 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, the moment you think about it, you just feel good. So that's the psychological, expression of Bun. And if any of you go into palliative care, so the Buddhist palliative care approach, this is one of the main things that we would teach people at the end of their life, or encourage carers to get people to recall the good things they've done in their life. Because for most people who've never meditated in their life before, to expect them like at the end of their life or in a lot of pain, and just to meditate on Buddha or something, it's just too much. But asking someone to recall the good things they've done in their lives, the things they feel most proud of, the kindest things they've done, it just bring up, even at the end of life, can just bring up so much joy and peace into their mind. So that's we call the Arya Sap. This is like the sort of noble treasures that you accumulate when you act well, act kindly, act with love and generosity, and you remember that's a resource that you can make use of throughout your life. If you're depressed, if you're downhearted, and just recall the good things you've done in your life, immediately you can feel better. Yeah.
So are you saying that there's no heaven or hell in Buddhism?
No, I'm not saying that. But it's not something that you can experience right here and right now, is it? But going back to the Kālāma Sutta, then so if we look in the Buddhist teachings, there are many references to other realms of being. So how is that, like, say, as a humanist, let's say, how do you relate to that? Well, my take on this is, well, let me give you a simile or an analogy. Let's say you were born in a country which is very flat, like Holland or somewhere like this. There's no mountains at all, completely flat, and sort of the biggest landform we've ever seen is like a hill of maybe 200 meters high or something like that. And then one day you just suddenly find yourself in a strange place. You've just been transported, and you don't know where you are, but you've been given a map. So you open the map and you say, well, how can I trust this map? So I don't know where this map's come from. So you walk along and you look to your left and you look to your right, and the map says there's a forest on the left. Yeah, there's a forest. The map says there's like a lake to the right. So after you've been walking for a while, this is a pretty good map. And then let's say you've been walking for a few hours, you're tired, and you sit down, you open up your map, and then you see way up there's something called mountains. What's a mountain? I don't know. And it says it's like 5,000 meters high. And everything in your personal experience says that's impossible. I can't imagine it. That can't be true. And then maybe you have a kind of dialogue in your mind. You say, well, is it really possible that this map could be so accurate in this part and so completely inaccurate in that part, given that it's just one map? So the approach I'm suggesting in Buddhism is there are so many teachings from the Buddha which you can put to the test in daily life very simply. And if you do that, then you start to develop a trust. This is a trustworthy teacher. This is someone who's wise, who knows what he's talking about. So then when you get teachings that are just completely, I just can't, it's heaven, hell, it's just too much for me. So, well, given that the person who's talking about these things is really trustworthy, I just take it on trust for the time being. I'm not saying I believe in it, but I'm just saying this is teachings given by someone who's really trustworthy. So out of respect for that person, you just take it on board for the time being. But you're all to keep this satyanurak. You say, I don't really know. Is there heaven? I don't know. Is there hell? I don't know. But the Buddha, whose teachings just make so much sense to me in all the other areas of my life, that I'm taking it on trust for the time being. So it's like a working hypothesis for a scientist, you could say. Mm.
Do you believe in life after the last breath? And how will you explain to people who believe that, life ends completely after you die, and the karma that you just previously explained to my colleague. It just, everything's end at that point, because I believe, like, totally opposite from that. I believe that everything's continue after that.
Yeah.
And you take the karma going forward. So first of all, I want to understand and get your thought about, like, life after the death.
Well, I would say if you were to speak to scientists, like leading scientists, like Nobel Prize winning scientists, what is the remaining problem? What is there in the world that science has not yet come up with any answers to? And almost all of them will say consciousness. We don't know what it is. Yeah. But at the same time, science, which we tend to believe is this kind of, there is this thing called science, like there's this thing called religion, and science is based on scientific principles. Well, in many cases it's not, and including medical sciences, there's this default belief that the mind is just an epiphenomena. The mind is just something that arises naturally from the chemicals in your brain and so on, so that the physical reality is the real. What's really happening is that there's chemical. People say that, but and it's just assuming that the question of consciousness has been discovered, that consciousness disappears at death. But that's a belief. It's a religious belief, basically. I mean, science in many ways can be a religion. And so much of science is based upon this belief, but it's not really honest about it. It's saying, well, yeah, of course. Yeah, and then you speak to scientists who have that and you say, yeah, we'll find this out. We're not quite there yet, but we'll find a way. But yet, how exactly do you explain the relationship between consciousness and the brain? How does physical phenomena create emotion? Where does this sense of subjectivity come from? Science does not have an answer for this. It hasn't been worked out. It's a belief. So the Buddhist point of view is that the consciousness is not created by material reality, and the material constituents of life, they do disappear. We can see, we can burn a body, but we can't burn a mind. And I would say that there are some compelling reasons or evidence to support the idea of rebirth. And for non-Buddhist or non-religious person, I think the most convincing are the memories of past lives amongst children. So there are children all around the world, usually between the age of 3 and 5. After they go to school and they get socialized in school, they tend to forget this thing. But the age of 3 to 5, and this is not restricted to countries and cultures where they believe in this. It's not something they've been taught. And the researchers who've done the most work for this in the University of Virginia, and you can look this up, and there are books they've written, and so they travel around the world to interview families of children who recall past lives in different countries, different parts of the country, and all the details that they can remember. And then they subject them to really rigorous investigation, make sure there's no possibility of any fraud or any way they could have come across this information. And you can imagine, given the hostility to that kind of hypothesis, they have to be so careful. They have to be absolutely sure before they put anything out there, publish anything, because they're going to get attacked so much. And they now have 2,500 cases. And you can read some of these up, and they're really amazing. So we can say as Buddhists, well, yeah, we don't know, but the Buddhist hypothesis is these 2,500 cases and all the evidence and the words of these children and the correspondence to things that are really happening or have happened in the past is explained best by rebirth. And if you reject rebirth, then the question is, how can you explain this without teaching of rebirth? So this idea that, you know, if you kill yourself, it's just like turning off a switch, you know, and that's the end of everything. You know, it's really, and it's of course young people now, it's becoming more in Thailand. You say, well, what's your, you know, on what are you basing this belief that this is going to be the end? It's just it's a superstitious belief. You don't have any proof for that, do you? Except that, you know, somebody dies and they don't come back. I think maybe it's like pee or something or something. But the consciousness precedes birth and succeeds it after the physical death has taken place. So yeah, that's my belief. But I'm saying I'm trying to keep it in a sort of more kind of scientific and way. And I think that the evidence supporting it, also people who recall past lives under hypnosis, is also very interesting. And I would challenge someone to say, this is the evidence. How do you explain this if you reject the idea of rebirth, or if you believe that life begins with conceptions or with the full functioning of the brain? The other thing that you may be familiar with is a lot of this research about near-death experience and people who are brain dead but then are revived and they have memories of things that took place while they were brain dead. And there was some studies in the West where they've they put things on the top of cupboards, things like that, because, you know, sometimes the really rationalist people, they become really irrational to protect this kind of rational explanation of something, and often people who have near-death experience, or, you know, they're brain dead and they feel like they're looking at their body from the ceiling. So to test that, they put things on top of cupboards which you couldn't, the patient couldn't possibly see or know anything about. And then, you know, they say, well, yeah, there was that on top, something really bizarre that really shouldn't be there, so it sticks in their memory. So there again, how do we explain that? If what does it mean to be dead? I mean, that again, it's not so clear cut, is it? It's just a convention that we take brain death to be the significant factor. But there are numbers of people who have experienced and can remember in detail things that happened when they were clinically dead. So again, what's the hypothesis to explain that? And often scientists just say, well, we can't explain that right now. We'll just sort of put that to one side. We'll work that out sometime in the future.
To continue about life and death questions, actually nowadays a lot of countries, the interest in terms of choice of death for the patient, and also, for example, the less state of cancer patient, or patient that feel that they loneliness is maybe severe depression. And for the Buddhist belief, we think that we have to save our life. And as the doctors, one of the goal, we have to save patient life as well. What do you think that the choice of death for the patient, and also versus the Buddhism, how it's going to be, and what do you think in the future trend of the choice of death?
Yes, I'm. Well, to begin with, just to speak as a Buddhist monk, if a Buddhist monk advises either abortion or euthanasia, and someone was to take their advice, the monk would be parajika. He would be no longer a monk. He would be expelled from the monastic order. considered to have committed murder. So the euthanasia is considered murder or the taking of a human life from Buddhist point of view. I think that, as you know, so this is going on to abortion rather than euthanasia, but it sort of covers the same ground in many ways. There's huge debate in America or like belief system cultures, about, the women's right to their own health and making choices for themselves, and they shouldn't be told what to do, and Christian beliefs. And as Buddhists, we do believe that life begins at conception, so that would correspond with Christian belief. But it seems quite obvious that in the first trimester, you're talking about something very different from the third trimester. Like a cluster of cells in a more or less fully developed, so recognizing this is not one and the same thing. But the Buddhist approach is to say that taking any life is karmically significant. It's bad karma. So even in the case of rape or incest or something like that, it's still taking a life. And you should recognize that. But now it's up to you. You need to think about this carefully, and you need to put yourself in a calm state of mind where you can look this through. You need to speak with everyone else involved and really reflect on this. But in the end of the day, if you make that decision, that's your decision to create that bad karma and to take responsibility for it. And if you decide, well, yes, it's bad karma, but it's preferable to the alternative, that's your decision. But as Buddhists, you have to make very clear that it's not just your body, it's not a private, there's a life there, there's a life involved. So this is kind of middle way for Buddhism. So we say euthanasia, yeah. Euthanasia makes sense if there's no rebirth. It doesn't make much sense if there is rebirth. So it is the taking of a life. And I think in terms of euthanasia, I think there are many more worrying aspects to it, because what they call assisted suicide in the West. Now, it started off like somebody who's in last stages of incredibly painful illness, and well, why prolong this? Just stop the suffering, and for many people that's a good reason. But now, I've read about occasions where someone gets the first diagnosis that they have ALS or something, and that in the future they're going to be like this and this and this, and say, well, let me just go out with a bang now, have a big party and say goodbye to everyone. So it's not, the suffering hasn't even started yet. So, how far back do you go? Where are the criteria to develop? But what I think is really worrying is the case of elderly people. We're moving into a world where there are more and more elderly people, and elderly people old people already now worrying all the time about being a burden on their children. All the medical costs and the time, they feel guilty and they feel bad because, and once you popularize the idea of euthanasia, and they say, well, old people, what do they do? They're just a burden on the world and on society, time to make way for the younger generation. And I could see that happening, this sense of start to say, well, your life is worth more than that life. And old people's lives, they're old, they can't do anything, they're just sitting around in a chair all day, and they're just, not contributing anything. Why hang around, So I think that with mercy killing or euthanasia, the assisted suicide, that's like the thin end of the wedge, and there are some really worrying and I think unfortunate consequences from agreeing to that. I think in the situation where someone's being kept alive on a machine or something, there again, that's something that you have to. It's a decision to be made with everybody involved, and yeah, it is karma, but it's not a heavy karma in the same way that sort of killing someone out of greed or hatred or delusion. There is the factor that it is done from compassion and that there's no way that person is going to get better. But nevertheless, at the end of the day, it is taking a life. So you have to take that on board and consider that as part of your reflection. I think I'd like right now, as time's getting on, I'd like to sort of move it a bit more to like your daily life and your stresses and strains and you know what you're going through on a daily basis, and how to increase your quality of life or to decrease the stresses that you feel you're under. Is anybody anything they'd like to bring up about that? What's let me just make one point that I think that most of us, I think all of us, have some core values and good idea of what's right and what's wrong and what's good and what's bad and so on. But what we have to acknowledge is that these things are with us when there's no real pressure upon us. But in moments of crisis, we tend to forget all of our values. And then when the crisis is past, then we remember them again. So this is the dilemma, isn't it? It's not that you don't know what's right and wrong. It's that how can you access that? How can that be a refuge to you, a resource to you, even when things are really tough and you've got all kinds of physical, psychological pressures upon you. And this is one of the reasons that we're stressing the practice of mindfulness, meditation, and training your mind. And one way of looking at this is to consider the meditation is providing like a bridge between your brain and your heart. So you can hear teachings, let's say the classic Buddhist teaching, one day we're going to have to be separated from everyone and everything that we love. Okay? So you hear that, yeah, that's true. Who could argue with that? Yeah, I know that. But why is it that when you lose somebody that you love, a relationship ends or a parent, grandparent passes away, it's as if you never knew that at all. It's just completely blown away by it. So, somebody else is bereaved or someone else breaks up with their boyfriend or the girlfriend, and we can give them all the good advice, but when it's us, it's something else. We're much better at teaching other people than we're teaching ourselves. So, do you recognize that this problem, and what do you do about it? So I feel that this practice of training the mind, developing a power of mindfulness is really the most effective way of integrating these basic truths. So they say Buddhist teaching is really they're pointing to these truths. I am of the nature to age. I've not gone beyond aging. Yeah, we're aging every day. I'm the nature to sicken. Even if you lead a really healthy lifestyle, you exercise every day, you eat really good foods, you do all this, it doesn't mean you're not going to get sick. There's no protection, absolutely, foolproof protection against sickness. and you're going to die. We're all going to die, and we don't know when that will take place, how many years in the future. Might be tomorrow, who knows? Might be today. And we don't know whether we're going to have a short, just die in our sleep with our socks on, and that'd be lovely. But, we don't know that's going to happen. And, let's say the worst happens. We're diagnosed with a wasting disease or with cancer. Do you have the resources that the psychological, spiritual resources that you feel you could handle that? So, there is a lot of these things we can just, I don't want to think about that now, it's depressing. But the Buddhist approach is you need to think about these things. You need to reflect upon them daily. And you need to integrate these things into the whole way you look at yourself and the world and the people around you. Because it's only by becoming friends with the truth, really absorbing the basic truths of human existence, that you can find any true peace in life. Okay, is there somebody want to say something? Sorry, yes.
เจ้าคุณครับ so we are all here because we want to be doctors, and since the first day of admissions, the professor asked us during admission, why do you want to be a doctor? And after we get in, there's always question which specialty do you want to go to? What kind of doctor do you want to go to? Do you want to be a professor? Do you want to be a GP? And on the opposite end, we were always constantly told, don't fail, don't fail this. Yeah, so there are states that we don't want to be in. You don't want to fail this test. You don't want to fall behind. When does that become a part of the suffering? แบบประมาณว่าวิภวะตัณหาภวะตัณหาประมาณเนี้ยครับ when does that become a suffering?
Yeah, I think there's a useful distinction to be made between pressure and stress. I think it's possible to be under pressure and not to feel stress. And of course, that's something really interesting to do. I mean, you're never going to be in a position, especially as a doctor, where you're not under pressure for various reasons, time pressures and financial, all kinds of different pressures. So that's not going to happen. But stress is, we use the word you use, vipavatanha, and it's thinking, or so just make a point about thinking. So we can look at thinking in two important kinds of thinking in terms of as a mental factor. Something happens in your mind. So you hear a sound, okay, say sound of a bird. And then something happens, something pops in your mind. Oh, there's a bird singing outside the window. Okay, so that's a inconsequential thought. It's not a karmically significant thought. But then you think, oh, that bird, that's such a lovely bird. That reminds me of that bird that was singing outside of our hotel when we were on holiday last month. Oh, what a great holiday that was. Do you remember we went to that restaurant and, that meal, I really like Italian food. It's just so great. I wonder whether we could get some, and your mind just go off right halfway around the world within a matter of a second. And this, so you have this initial thought, it's like a trigger thought, and then you have the thought that you create something out of it. And that creating something we call kitbrungdak. Okay, so the part of the mindfulness is being present to your experience. So when you have that kind of trigger thought, you don't necessarily have to just grasp onto it and brungdang. You don't have to create a story out of it, particularly if it's a story that's depressing or creates anxiety in your mind. You recognize it as a thought. And so this is one of the most important skills, life skills to learn. And, you can summarize it very simply as like recognizing a thought, as a process, as something that happens. It's an event. It's a mental event. So, something comes up into your mind. If you lack mindfulness, especially if it's something kind of meaningful or that you've thought about before, your mind just, tok wrong, it just goes into that. But if you have that sufficient clarity and sharpness and brightness of mind, you recognize there's that thought again. Don't follow that one. You don't need to. Why would you follow it? Why would you create a story out of it? And then it just passes away by itself. But without mindfulness, you can't do that. It's not something you can just decide not to worry about something or decide not to get stressed out about something. So again, the kind of things to look into as well are this whole area of success and failure, and how you understand those words. What is it to be successful? What is it to fail? And most I think most people who have really developed something in their life, they feel a lot of gratitude for their failures. Often I think you've seen, you learn often a lot more from your failures than your successes. Because every time you fail, you learn, this is another way not to do it, and it's easy just to take things for granted when you're successful. And also to see how what happens in your heart with success and failure. If you've been brought up in a family or a school in which parents or teachers have tied your sense of your self-worth, or even how lovable, how you are, according to how successful you are, there's then you can be really triggered by that whole sense of failure. And there's what's her name? Susan Dweck. Anyway, I can find a reference to you. But one of the interesting theories to develop the last few years is how people understand intelligence and being smart. And there are real drawbacks to considering intelligence as something you have, or do you think, I am smart? Psychologically, that's disastrous, thinking you're smart. One of the experiments they did with this, they gave a whole number of students these psychological questionnaire, 100 questions, and they smuggled the real question they wanted is, do you consider yourself smart? Okay, and then they had these students go into another room where there was a test, and they made it easy to cheat, and they had cameras. And so what they wanted to do was to see the correlation between cheating and this labeling oneself as smart. And the students who considered themselves smart were much more likely to cheat than the others, because exams become not just a test of how much knowledge or what you know, but it's of who you are. And so there's that kind of stress that comes, and so before exams, the stress of this is a test of me and my worth as a human being, and then if they fail, the depression and the suffering is like, I'm a fake, and I've proved that I'm not what I think I am. And so the advice given, and this very Buddhist advice, is you look at intelligence as in terms of process, and it's something, and exams are passed not because you possess something called intelligence that you have to express, but because you're putting in the work and the effort, well-focused effort into preparing for the exam. And then if you're successful, there's no real sense of self, I'm something special. Yeah, I did the work, I got the result. And if you fail in the exam, yeah, I didn't put enough effort, or I put the wrong kind of effort, wrongly focused effort, it doesn't affect your self-worth and succeed or anything. It's just, it's just I didn't do the work, and I just need to change how I work or improve how I work in future. So I say there's the pressure of exams, but not necessarily the stress that most people associate with them. So much of that stress is about the way that we hold the exams, or the way that how we consider what exams are and what they mean to us in our life and our standing in our community or in our family or something like that. Anybody over this side want to contribute?
I just had like a more basic question about the idea of like taking lives from cells. I thought about it for a while, like do bacteria count too? Like every time we use hand gel, especially because sterilization is so important in like a medical setting, or for example, when we prescribe someone antibiotics, are we just like killing millions of lives?
I think the Buddha is like very reasonable about these things. If you compare with the Jain religion, which appeared in the world about the same time, the founder of Jain religion was a contemporary of the Buddha, and I've been tudong in India, I met like Jain monks. And the Jain monk, they wear masks all the time, so not so different but in order to prevent small creatures coming into their nose, every time you breathe in, you kill creatures. I mean, you kill things with life just every time you inhale. Or you drive a car, how many insects are gonna die when you what are you gonna do? Stop driving, stop breathing, you have to draw a line somewhere. And so that this microbes and bacteria and things like that are not considered karmically meaningful. It's not mebab. But with small creatures, then like ants and things like that, then we have to be very, very careful as much as we can. So anything you can see basically with your naked eye.
May I ask something?
Yeah.
I have a question about this wearing mask thing.
Yeah.
Because I'm just wondering, are we being too afraid or fearful or too much anxiety about? Eventually, are we gonna go back and live a normal life and not be fearful of this infection? What do you think about that?
It's a tough one, isn't it? I mean, my own standards, I've had the vaccine, and every time I come out into meeting people, I take gachai cow. So it's like, and if I'm in a group of people, I wear the mask just out of politeness, but if I'm talking like this, and it's just I just take it off. And but I don't know. I think that I don't think I have a good answer for that, because different people have different standards, and hospitals, it's just like a special case, isn't it? I think you have to be, if there is ever any place where masks are a good idea, it's a hospital probably. But if everyone's had like the ATK, and you've had the vaccines, and you've taken the test, and you're with other people who also, then for me taking off masks is okay. But again, you just have to. It's a group decision, isn't it? And just to decide on what everyone feels comfortable with. I think people's anxiety levels vary so much, and here again, you have a decision to make in any kind of community. Do you take the most anxious people as the standard, or the least anxious people, or the middle, somewhere in between? And it's not such a easy decision, is it? What do you think?
What do I think?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm personally wearing a mask for other people so
Yeah.
they don't get anxious.
Yeah.
So, but I don't, I mean, right, because I personally think that, there are like tuberculosis or other things in the air also, that even sometimes at this point, even worse than getting COVID, but, so, but I understand that I think that there's still that fear in everyone's mind about what happened in the past when COVID was really bad. So, right. Yeah.
I was speaking to someone, an old friend of mine, a few days ago. He's a really smart guy, and he believes that there's no such thing as viruses. It's never been proved that such a thing as a virus exists, and that virology is a fraud. And so his suggestion was, don't go into virology because you'll be out of a job soon when they expose the truth about viruses. But yeah, so many different opinions.
What kind of work was he?
Pardon?
What kind of work does he do?
He's a monk. Yeah.
Oh, he's a monk. Right.
Reads too much, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think that sometimes, like what you compare the Western world. I mean, the science, like sometimes science like to think that they are superior because it's something that can be proved or disproved, but in a lot of ways, it is not really. I mean, I just feel like sometimes this day we sometimes go too far to say that, I mean, some personal experience, I mean, cannot be accepted because until it actually can be proven by science, I mean, it doesn't exist. And I think that, there definitely should be something in the middle about that. So
yeah, I mean, I think an important thing to look at is, in any society, you have a balance between the needs of the individual and the community or the group. And now American society in particular is like in real crisis. Like I think almost half of American population think it's highly likely that there'll be a civil war within the next 10 years. Almost half think that democracy is unlikely to last more than 10 years. So this is like huge, it's significant percentage. And to generalize a little bit, I was talking about the dangers of generalization just now, but it seems like the idea of a common ground is disappearing, almost disappear in the West. So much focus on the individual and de-emphasis on the group. And to my mind, at least, and of course I don't live there, and it seemed to me it's extreme and it's gone too far. But then you have other, like communist societies, where it goes too far in the other direction, maybe like these days in North Korea or something like this, where the community is everything and the individual is nothing. Myself, I think Thailand is in a good place as a society in terms of the relative importance of the individual and the group, and something to appreciate, because there is a lot of scope for self-expression, in Thai society, but we still also have this warm group and community and family and support. And I think it's something that's really worth recognizing. There's so many, I've been here most of my life now, 44 years, but I feel there's some aspects of Thai culture and society that, if you've grown up, you don't have the grounds to compare. Because when I was young, I traveled from the age of 17 and traveled all around the world by myself. I had so many different experiences and different cultures. But I would say one feature of Thai is the acceptance of diversity. I don't know anywhere in the world where there's that maturity of people being able to live with others who are different religious, different beliefs, and to live in harmony with them. If you compare this with the Western world and the prejudice and the wars and violence that goes along with against minorities, and I've never seen that in Thailand. And it's unique, almost unique, I would say, and something to really, this is something to take care of, and to, even when I was at school, someone who was outwardly gay, he wouldn't want to walk in, outside in the evening, and you'd get beaten up, you'd get attacked. And to this day, people, Muslims and people at times, are often Asians people, black people, their life is very difficult simply because of the color of their skin, simply because of their religious beliefs, simply because of their sexual orientation. And Thailand has almost been free of all this. I mean, it's absolutely wonderful. Something really to be proud of, I think. Anything else? I'm here once a year, so this is your chance.
Right. Any spiritual crisis, personal problems, any burning existential question?
Hello, I just have a quick question following up on Nisa's question. So my understanding is that animals experience life differently to human, and we're kind of generalizing the idea of human expectations, or how human feels on other animals. For example, I think jellyfish only has few neurons, and they don't really experience, I'm not sure, pain or anything, but when you compare that to pigs or dolphins, they have different level of, I wouldn't say consciousness because that's not quantifiable, but level of intelligence, let's say. How would you talk about karma in killing a jellyfish compared to a pig, or without or with intent? For example,
yes,
for food,
it's meaningful, and it's bad karma, and I think again, we're in the shadow of Western culture and Western beliefs. If you look at Descartes, who's one of the giants of Western thought. I think, therefore I am, and was one of the most influential philosophers of the Western world, and he believed that thinking that animals have consciousness is just anthropomorphic delusion. And if you kick a dog and the dog squeals, if you think that's the dog's in pain, that's just your misinterpretation. It would be just like a squeaking of an engine or of a door hinges or something like that. So the idea that animals have consciousness is a very recent one in Western culture, and And throughout the 20th century, the behaviorist psychologists were really ruled the psychology departments of the Western world and therefore of the world. So there's some very weird ideas. And then also, of course, in the religions of the West, animals have been seen to be like the servants. God made these to serve human beings. So like human beings have the right to hunt them or eat them or something because God made them for us. Whereas in Buddhism, it's this universal, we're sappasat thang lai. So we consider everything that has consciousness, has meaning and value, and we respect it, and we don't feel we have a right to kill an animal just because we find its flesh delicious, or whatever. And of course, there are many Buddhists who don't follow that that rule, that precept. But that's the understanding behind it. I just read a couple of days ago an article speculating that it's one of the most interesting develops in AI. One is that they're hoping to be able to find a means of communicating with animals. Of course, their mental processes will be very different from ours, and the world they live in is different because of the senses are different. If you think that, like human beings, we have eyes, ears, nose, tongue, but a huge part of our brain is actually concerned with just processing sight. And so sight is our number one sense organ, and then nose is number two. And so that affects our world, and what we consider like the real world is very much because of the way our eyes work and the way our ears work and the way the brain interprets that. But then if you have animals with their eyes on the side of their head, or like the sort of concave eyes of the insects, their visual, their world is different from our world. And if you have a dog, let's say you have like 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools. You can imagine that amount of water, and you put one drop of scent or something in that, one drop in 20, and a dog can recognize that smell. So their world is a smell world. Right? So they're living in the same world, but they're living in a dog world. But they have consciousness, and the Buddha says that it's possible for, as consciousness travels through, we can be reborn in these realms as animals. And prior to, in the Ayutthaya period, where it's the first real encounter with the West, with the Dutch, Portuguese, British, French traders in Ayutthaya, prior to that, Thais would very rarely eat meat because of this fear that the animals might be somebody for like mi bun kun, in the past. It might be a parent or it might be a great we don't know who. But it was gradually that changed through influence of Western culture. So I think that the difference that we make between animals and human beings is, at least it seems, that animals don't have self-consciousness or don't have kind of a volition in the way that we do. That we're, for instance, let's say, you're walking past this table and you're all alone in this room and you see this and you really want one of these, okay? And nobody would know if you took it, but you don't take it. You say, well, why didn't you take it? You want it. You have that instinct to take something that you want, that you like, but you didn't. You say, well, it doesn't belong to me, or he's using it wouldn't be fair on him, so this is one of the basic features of human beings, which why it's considered so much bun to be born as a human being, because we have all the same instincts of animals, the instinct for procreation and et cetera, but we are not compelled to follow them in every case. So in certain cases, for certain reasons, we can say, yeah, I really want that, but no, I'm not going to take it. And this is the basis of Buddhist morality, of C. You see, going back to what I started with, this idea of belief system, religions, and a creator God. So in those religious systems, morality is something derived from God or the deity. And you should do this, and if you don't, you're going to be punished. If you do, you're going to be rewarded. So in Europe, where you get more secular society now, and people don't believe in God, then people say, well, why should I be, if the moral system is derived from God and there's no God, well, why should I be moral? There's a real worry there. But in Buddhism, we start off with a basic question. Okay, we're living together as human beings. We all have defilements. We have greed and hatred and delusions and jealousies and all this stuff. So given that we all have these things inside us, how can we live together in harmony? What's the best way of living together given that human beings are like this? What is the basic need that we need to meet? And first answer is safety. We need, in a family or in a community, first before anything else, we need to feel safe. We need to feel we're safe, our children are safe, our family is safe. Otherwise, you can meditate, you won't get anywhere if you can't meet that basic need for safety and security. So given the fact that we get angry with each other and sometimes maybe we want to hit each other or even kill each other, what can we do to create that sense of safety? So the answer here is we make use of this feature of human psychology that we may want to do something, but we don't have to do it. And so we take on precepts. So we say to our family and people around us, yeah, sometimes, I get really angry. Sometimes I just want to slap you. Sometimes I just want to, but I promise you that no matter how angry I get, no matter how aggressive I feel, I will not abuse you physically or verbally. And when you make that commitment to your family and your friends then everybody feels safe. They're not having these really high expectations that you're always full of love and kindness. That's not possible. But you make your stand on your actions and your speech. Okay, that doesn't mean that's the end of the matter, because you're going to have to work on those, through meditation and through you're working on those, the greed and the selfish and all these things. It's not that it's enough just not to hurt anybody. But that's necessary condition. It's not sufficient condition, it's necessary condition. And similarly with taking what's not given, or you're in a stable relationship, you say, okay, I'm just an ordinary guy, I see other women and sometimes I find them really attractive. But I promise you, I'm never going to act upon that. I'm never going to speak with that. It's just something that arises and passes away just because it's part of being a human being. And then, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your husband, your wife can relax. You feel safe. You don't have to worry because you've made that. And it's a doable commitment. You can't say, I love you and I'm never going to find anybody else attractive except for you. Yeah, maybe in stories and but in real life, it's not possible. Yeah. But it's not that you don't have the instincts of an animal or of a living being. It's whether or not you act upon them. And that's where you can create societies, communities, families, where there's a sense of safety and trust and warmth, and you can grow and flourish together, even though, you've still got a lot of things going on and you're working on those things.
Can I ask you a question? Just can I ask you a question? Just what? There's a lot of Buddhism spreading around Southeast Asia, like Burma, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and maybe some part of India and Sri Lanka. Why do you choose to be ordained in Thailand?
So I just a little bit of my story. So I grew up in England in a kind of secular background. Never interested in religion, but I was really interested in question like what's the best way to live your life as a human being. That was one question. The other question is everybody wants to be happy, but why is there so much suffering in the world? And do you just have to put up with, is it fixed or is there something that you can do about it? And if there is something that you can do about it, then what, how do you do that? So I had these kind of questions, and I came across Buddhist teaching, and it just seemed to answer all my questions about meaningful life, human suffering, and everything. So that was when I became really wanted to study and practice Buddhism. But I was also just young and I wanted some adventure, and I had always incredible pull to Asia. I never felt like Europe or England was my home. I felt I wanted to come to Asia. So I finished high school. I did my high school a year early, so I was 17 when I left, and I just traveled overland, hitchhiking to all across Europe and Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and so learning about life and learning about Buddhism and religions, and so 2 years before I got back to England, and I realized I don't want to go to university. I just want to find a way of practicing Buddhism, but I didn't know quite how to do it or what, as a lifestyle, and then I enrolled in a meditation course, Vipassana course, and the teacher had been a monk in Thailand for some years, and he just recently disrobed and set up a meditation center in south of England. And so in his discourses, he would talk about his time as a monk in Thailand in a forest, and I thought, this is what I've been looking for, for 2 years. I have to come back to England before I find it. So that was when I decided to come to Thailand. And then somebody told me, there's a group of monks from American, British monks trained in Thailand who are in London now. And they're looking to find a place in the countryside to make a forest monastery. Why don't you go and ask for some advice? And so that was how I met Lumpur Sumedho, who is the senior Western disciple of Ajahn Chah. And I ended up spending 6 months with him and his Sangha, spent the Panacea in Oxford with him. And so in November of 1978, I came to Thailand to become disciple of Ajahn Chah.
Okay, I would like to say something on this halfway of our course today. As you know that we are in the module of musculoskeletal integumentary, and this also combined with humanistic. Every Friday we will have a humanistic module to interface with us. And today we have a very good opportunity. We have a very great lecture. So I believe it's not the end right now. We still have another halfway to go. But if some people feel exhaust, and we wish to have some break.
Okay, if you'd like to sit down, please, and we have time for another short session. So this can be anything at all. It can be about Buddhism. It can be about anything at all. You can please feel free.
Yes, there is nothing that is not the right question.
Yeah.
So, yeah, someone was saying that they want to ask about how to practice meditation or something
Yeah.
like that. So,
Yeah, so let me, first of all, meditation is not a panacea. That means it's not the answer to every problem. And for people with psychosis or with serious mental problems, meditation is not a good idea. It's not like, oh yeah, just get someone to meditate and they'll be okay. Also, I mean, there are many different things that go under the name of meditation, and so Buddhist meditation is not necessarily the same thing as meditation in other traditions. So let me give a little bit of a background. First of all, if somebody is really depressed, then my advice is first get out of your room, physical exercise, go out into the countryside, go walking in the countryside, be out in the nature, eat well, do good things for other people, do kind actions for other people. The reason why giving is stressed so much in Buddhism is because every time you give something, you strengthen an identity. Every time you do something, you strengthen your identity. But giving strengthens your identity as a giver. And that's one of the most healthy identities you can have. And if you are something who has something to give, someone who gives, that gives a real sense of self-esteem, self-respect. When I was first in Thailand in the late 1970s, you go on Bindabat and go on alms round in local villages, and people were so poor, but they would all be standing at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, standing outside their house with their sticky rice container, and they would put a lump of sticky rice into everyone's bowl. So nobody had any money in those days. Nobody had cash. Nobody had bank accounts, but everyone had rice. And so people gave what they had, which was rice, and you could see that they were really proud of that. Was like start off the day by giving. You give to the monks, and then you go off to the fields and do your work. But you could see that they had no sense of shame or self-consciousness about being poor. They had enough, usually, for what they needed, but they identified themselves as givers. And they were people who supported the monks and supported the good things and the life of the monks. And giving is a most therapeutic activity. So if you have a friend or anyone who's feeling miserable, feeling down, take them somewhere, and it doesn't have to be a monastery. You don't have to give to monks. Go and treat go to the school for the blind or for disabled children. Go and treat elderly in a care home. Just give some, and that for one of the basic good practices for depression. Just shortly before I came to Thailand, I was already living in monastery then, and I went on alms round to the house of a woman. She had been the chairman or president of the UK psychiatric association or whatever. So she was one of the leading psychiatrists of her generation, lived in a big house in Hampstead in London. And she just recently retired. So I'm very interested in psychiatry and what she learned from her life, and especially being a Buddhist. And so I asked her, you've got any kind of lessons you learned from 40-something years as a psychiatrist? And she said, the 5 precepts. She said, if there's one thing that I would say would increase the mental health of all my patients, or one thing that had contributed to their mental health problems, that was their behavior and their conduct, as they kept 5 precepts. So if you keep 5 precepts voluntarily and through understanding the value of each precept, as I explained a little bit just now, you start to feel a real sense of self-respect. You become a good friend to yourself, especially if you're able to, weather through challenges and temptations and maintain your consistency. You start to trust yourself. So giving and precepts, these are foundations for basic mental health. And Buddhist meditation is not just kind of an exercise that's separate. It's part of your life and has to be integrated into your life. So Buddhist practice, we divide into 2 kinds. We call formal and informal practice, or formal and informal meditation. So formal meditation is what you probably understand by meditation, like sitting cross-legged with your eyes closed, or walking up and down on a walking path. But if that's all that you do in a day, and in the rest of the day you just let your mind go where it will, then you're never really going to get much from it. But Buddhist practice is a whole approach to your life, and it has if you are doing the formal meditation practice regularly, you will receive the results in your daily life. But if you are also trying to be mindful, awake, aware, kind, compassionate in your daily life, you will find that it helps in your formal meditation. So these 2 things have to inform each other or to support each other. For the formal meditation practice, the best time is early in the morning. Many people meditate before they go to sleep, and that's good in terms of just relaxing. If you've got a lot of accumulated stress and so on, it's very good, help you to get to sleep. It's a good, very wise, intelligent way of ending the day. But for making real progress in meditation, the morning is much better, because you've rested, you don't have much going on in your head, you're fresh, and importantly, if you meditate in the morning and then afterwards you try to observe if there are any results, and you notice a little bit more relaxed, a little bit calmer, a little bit more patient, a little kinder. These are incremental. These are not like, wow, it's just transformed my life overnight. And if you look for those really kind of special experiences in a short term of time, you get frustrated and lose your enthusiasm. But if you can observe these small incremental increases in the quality of your life, then that will help you to find the motivation to continue. So continuity and consistency is the most important thing. Now, often the tendency is to get very enthusiastic and really go at it for a while, and then it just gradually fades out. And then something happens and you're really upset, or why did I stop meditating? You start again. So it's like someone who's rubbing the 2 sticks together to make fire, and it get to a certain state, then you put them down, and then a bit later you take them up again, and you never get to that critical point where you get some fire, and eventually you just decide it's not really working. So, what exactly is meditation? What are you doing? So many different techniques. But if we ground it in the Buddhist vision of life and the challenges or the problems that we have, in the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha said we suffer unnecessarily because of defilement, greed, hatred, delusion, and so on. And that there is a freedom from that suffering. There is true happiness to be found through the development of virtues, good qualities, kusala dhamma, kusala tham. So suffering is dependent on defilement or giled, and freedom from suffering, liberation, true happiness is dependent upon kunatham or kusalatham. So that's the philosophy, if you like, that's the theory. So if this is the case, if we suffer because of defilement, then first of all, the life skill that we all need, number one, is to prevent defilement from entering our mind. So number one. Number two, given that that's really difficult, we also need to develop a second life skill, which is to let go of defilement that's already risen in our mind. If our theory is correct, and that true happiness comes from cultivation of good qualities, wholesome dhammas, then the next challenge is to find a way of bringing into our mind, introducing into our mind good qualities that are not there yet, that we haven't yet developed. And fourthly, if they have appeared in our mind to one degree, the fourth final challenge is cultivating them, developing them, bringing them to maturity. So these are four necessary life skills to prevent as yet unarisen negative mental states from entering the mind. Second, from dealing effectively with negative mental states that are already in our mind. Thirdly, by bringing into the mind, introducing into the mind as yet unarisen positive qualities. And fourthly, cultivating systematically and bringing to maturity wholesome positive qualities that are already in the mind. So meditation is the activity designed to address or to develop these four life skills. That's what we're doing when we're meditating. So we take a particular object, let's say the breath, sensation of the breath as an object. And so we trying to develop a relationship between the mind and the object, here the breath, in such a way that as yet unarisen negative mental states will not arise, and in such a way that we can abandon, let go of negative mental states that have arisen. We want to cultivate a relationship with our meditation object in such a way that as yet unarisen positive mental states arise in the mind, and in such a way that we can further cultivate wholesome mental states, positive mental states that have arisen. So whether you're using the breath or a word or a mental image, whatever it might be, this is the underlying structure, what we're trying to do, the effort. So it's not a relaxation effort, it's a putting forth of well-directed, systematic effort and attention. So when we start to apply, well, how do we create this relationship? So then we say, well, what are the causes and conditions for that? We start physically. What are the causes and conditions that would make most conducive to this process? Well, we observe that we need a room that's not too stuffy, not too hot, not too cold. Clothing, not too tight. We can loose clothing. Good ventilation. Then we need to sit in a way which is most helpful to the realization of our objectives. And so sitting cross-legged is considered the best posture because it gives you a firm triangular basis for your body. It allows the free flow of the energies within the body. And the area of the body which is crucial, most important in determining whether or not the meditation will develop is the spine. So how you place your legs, your arms, your hands, that you can experiment with that. But the important thing is that you sit straight, but not rigidly straight. And you can imagine like something, like a force pulling the top of your head up towards the ceiling. So it's a bit like if you put your clothes on a hanger in your cupboard, in the wardrobe. So you have the spine is straight and everything else can relax around the spine. So you're looking for a balance between effort and relaxation. And this right here, right at the beginning of meditation, you're learning that this really crucial life skill. Because we constantly have problems, don't we, between effort and relaxation. Usually when we put effort, we lack relaxation and we get stressed. When we relax, we just completely relax and just sort of lose all sense of mental clarity. But in meditation, it's giving us the means by which we can experiment and find a means of a sense of applying effort which is disciplined and which is focused, but yet is relaxed. And the meditation is good for this because you get immediate feedback. And to be able to learn quickly, feedback is very important, isn't it? In this case, if you're putting too much effort, your mind doesn't become calm. You get agitated. You can even get headache or feeling a constriction in your chest. So this is the feedback your body is giving you, that too much effort, not enough relaxation. If you're too relaxed, then you start to lose your posture and you start to get sleepy, dull. So this is the body telling you too much relaxation, a little bit more effort. So we don't have to talk about like results of meditation here, but we're looking at the process of meditation itself and the life lessons that you can learn, life skills that you can learn, and particularly the relationship between posture and mental states, the balance between effort and relaxation. It's trial and error. No matter how many books you read, how many teachers you listen to, at the end of the day, you have to try this out and find out what works for you. The other important factor, I'm going to have to leave soon, I'll just wait, one or two things, is motivation. Now, whether it's studying here or anywhere, or meditate, we tend to think like motivation is something outside the process itself. But here it's integral. What you're learning is how to motivate yourself. And if you have a wrong motivation with meditation, then you won't develop correctly. So wrong motivation, when you want to get something from meditation, you want some kind of special experience, you want to be special in some kind of way. And so this is when motivation is is a defilement. So you're actually using, allowing the mind to be ruled by defilement in the effort to abandon defilement. So motivation can be wholesome or unwholesome. It can be helpful, unhelpful. If it's the unwholesome motivation, we call it tanha or craving. If it's the wholesome motivation, we call chanta. Unwholesome motivation, unhelpful motivation, is bound up with self and focused on the results of action. I want to get this, I want to realize that, I want to be peaceful, so that's the wrong motivation. Right motivation is focused on the action itself. I want to do this, I want to develop this. So these are psychologically very different. And we're learning from this because one can easily turn into the other. So we're observing this. So when we get the motivation right, energy, effort comes naturally, it just flows naturally. So at the beginning of a meditation, check your motivation and create wholesome motivation, inspiring motivation based upon the action itself and the process itself rather than on the results of the process. Start off with a short period, but be consistent, and you'll gradually increase the time. You could start off with 5 minutes, and gradually over a period of weeks or months, move up to 10 minutes, 15 minutes. If you can get to half an hour, great, depending on time pressures that you have. But also, if you develop this mindfulness of breathing or mindfulness of a word like Buddho, for instance, then you can turn to this during the day. If during the day you're tired, you're weary, you've got a lot going on, these days the tendency is just to get out your phone on the line, receive line, look at line, or maybe YouTube or something, but Instagram, but just to take a minute, just 1 minute, just breathing in and breathing out, being mindful of your breath. And it's very refreshing. It doesn't take a long time. It's just like a mini meditation, just to reboot or just to restart and make a fresh start again and again throughout the day. Okay, so those are a few preliminary assessments. So more Sushana and more Somsak, they meditate every day, so they can they can be my representatives, and if anybody's interested, you can ask them to lead a session. Yeah.
Anybody would like to ask Prajaan more?
Yeah, I think he have to leave soon to go to appointment.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, something that Prajaan mentioned about meditation. I believe as you asked about Kālāma Sutra, I would like to challenge everybody to experience all these things by yourselves. I just make the meditation last month at a special one, and I found something new, and it's kind of the Paccatang Vetitapo Vidyuhiti. That means you know by yourselves. So it's time. Okay, so.
I forgot. I've got to go and visit Mosali.
Right. Okay. So, on behalf of our team with the Humanistic and integumentary musculoskeletal module, Chulalongkorn University, International Medical Program. I would like to put all my gratitude and respect toพระอาจารย์ Jayasaro, my utmost crew, and who cultivate me in many Vattana, เจริญ in our behavior and career path. And I would like to thank you อาจารย์ M อาจารย์พลเลิศอาจารย์ C and every people to have this program with us, and it's not kind of usual for the young generation at this time to have this science, art, philosophy in harmonize, to have all these people develop ourselves, and I hope that every people can get beyond your expectation. Anything that I impose พระอาจารย์ today and all the people, please be kindness to อภัย to me and our team ครับ Thank you very much ครับ